and Fagradalsfjall. Professor Trolla, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for the kind invitation and the kind introduction. And I had this one here, yeah. So it's wonderful to have the opportunity to talk about the recent work we have been doing on these, socially maybe very disastrous eruptions, but scientifically very exciting events. And I'd like to take you today to La Palma and to Iceland. And I'd like to summarize with what we have learned from these eruptions. And I'd like to focus on using these eruptions as a chemical probe, where we can learn something about the volcano from looking at these eruptions in high resolution. I usually start with a picture of Jules Verne's journey to the center of the Earth. And some people know this, others don't, but the start of the center of the journey to the center of the Earth was actually in an Icelandic volcano. It was at Snæfellsjökull. This is where Professor Liedenbrock entered to find the center of the Earth, and they returned at Stromboli, implying that the volcanoes are all connected under the surface. So Jules Verne had this idea. And in a way, many volcanoes are connected, but maybe not Iceland and Stromboli, but we'll see. So today we have a somewhat different view of how the Earth works. We know that we have a convecting mantle, and we have a lithosphere, and then we have a very thin crust on top. We have different types of volcanoes, and magma is one of the key probes into the Earth interior, because it travels from the source to the surface, and therefore we can learn about the source of the magma as well as the processes the magma has experienced on the way to the surface. And also sometimes we can even see the rocks the magma has passed if there was enough interaction. So the challenge for the petrologist is to try to read the rocks and interpret the signals that we see into this language that we can understand. So I'd like to take you to the Canary Islands to start with, and in particular the island of La Palma. The Canary Islands are volcanic in origin, and they erupt rather infrequently, and there is an age progression. So here's the Canary Islands, and here's the chain of islands, and up here we have Iceland. We go there later, but here we have a chain of islands. And this one here is very old, 25 million years. And this one here, El Hierro, is very young. La Palma is about 4 million years old. And here we have the magnetic anomalies on the sea floor. And they are Jurassic in age, 156 million years. So here the islands are cutting across the ocean floor magnetic anomalies, implying that they are completely different to normal ocean floor tectonics. And people doing these little games, you can draw an Euler pole, a rotational pole, if you want to do this for the Canaries. And for the Madeira archipelago, you find that they follow a similar rotational axis of the African plate. And this implies that we are likely dealing with a plume type volcanic system there. The island of La Palma erupted prior to 2021 in 1971. So there was quite some time in between, 50 years in between. And the eruption prior to that was 1949. So the eruptions are not very frequent. Iceland is much more frequent. But this is good in one way, but it's bad in another way. It's bad in the sense that people forget. And the problem is that very few people have witnessed several of the eruptions, and that means we're losing memory, we're losing practical memory, and that's often an issue here. So let me talk a little bit about the La Palma eruption. Here we have the old shield in La Palma, it's the Tabriente shield. This is several million years old. And we have the new ridge, which is called the Cumbre Vieja ridge. And there we have all the eruptions of the historical time, starting with 1480s. There was one eruption here, and then we have several ones here along the western side. And here we have the 1585, then it jumps down here, 1646, 1677, 1712, and then it jumps to 1949. But there were several vents in 1949. So one lava was going this way, the other that way. And then 1971 was down here. So it jumps up and down along this ridge. And while most of the historical eruptions were on the steep side of the ridge here, forming these narrow channels of lava, this one here was on the flat area, which had a lot of agriculture, and the lava spread out in a wide area. So here's a few photos from 1970, could be from the current eruption or the recent eruption, because the processes are very similar. Up here. So here's just a detailed map of it, and what we find is that all these eruptions look similar. There is a vent system here, somewhere close to the ridge, and then we have others going either to the east or the west, and then from 1 week to about 3 months, but not a lot longer, and volumes are also very much confined to this. They're very small eruptions by comparison. So, but small is one of those terms. When we look at this is a Google Earth view from just before the eruption, and this White House is this White House, and this one here is this one here. So within 3 months, this volcano grew here, and you see it during the eruption. So this is a very fast process with enormous growth rates, but it's very punctuated. So here is first day Dia Uno, and here is Dia 87. So this whole edifice grew within a short time. We had unrest there since 2017, but it was very deep. And then in September 21, the seismic unrest intensified, and the eruption began on the 19th of September at 1400, and it lasted until mid-December 21. There was a number of active vents, and the emitted products were only 0.3 cubic kilometers, so a very small eruption, and the volcano explosivity index was 3, so also not very dangerous, technically speaking. So the end of the eruption was officially announced at Christmas 2021 after a 10-day period of no activity. So here's the volcano again that grew there. And let's see if I get the video to work. This is a little impression of the eruption. So, and you've seen it's got several vents here. So this is very exciting because we had a vent here. We had one here, several actually, one main one and a small one. And then we had one here. And they were active at different rates and at different times. And this was great for scientists to watch, of course. But when the eruption stopped, you couldn't go there, obviously, during the eruption. But when the eruption stopped, this is January 22, then you could actually go there. But it was very dangerous, nevertheless, because you see the blue haze. The blue means sulfur. So there is sulfurous haze there, and you can see it from the yellow specks here. So there was still a lot of gas there. And this is when you go a little bit closer to the volcano. You still need the permission to go there today. It's still considered highly dangerous. It's now sinking, actually. The volcano is sinking in itself. And this is kind of how it looks like. The trees have not recovered. They're still looking like this, unfortunately. And this is the vent area. So, but moving a little bit further down from the vent, we see a lot of this. This is one of the houses, and this is a lot of the lapilli, the fine material that was falling down, the tephra, and Here is one of the houses closest to the vent. You can see the vent just here, and this is one of my colleagues. This was in October of that year 21, and here's a few more of those impressions. This is now from December 8th, and just in between October and December, something happened. Not only was that house almost completely covered, a new vent opened up just in front of this house, and this is basically the start. This is where the vent later appeared, and let's see, will I get this to work? Oh no. Well, the video doesn't want to work, but I guess you get the idea. So, and the house was covered in ash, and it's still kind of not fully cleaned up, and here's the ash layers that give rise to this. So this was accumulating in only 3 months. And if you look at the ash very carefully, what you find is it has these tiny little spines at the side. This is when the bubbles grow in the magma, and then they rupture the magma effectively, and then you get these little spines. And this is part of the problem. Not only does that mean that grains are locking into each other, it also means if you breathe it in, if you inhale it, they will never come out again. You will have them for the rest of your life. So, and this was a huge problem during the eruption because there was a lot of dust in the air, and you also need to work with protection because there was so much ash at the time. So, but there was also larger pyroclastic material. You see the ash here, and then we had some of these lava bombs coming down, and I wanted to share that with you because in some of the old drawings, this is from 1677, some of the features that were painted didn't make sense to us for a long time until we actually witnessed them during the eruption. So let me show you this video here, and please, I hope this video works. Yes. So, and here's another little one. Because we couldn't resist, we had to open it. Oops. So, and what we learned there was that some of these reports we had from ancient historical eruptions of houses suddenly going on fire, although the lava has not arrived yet. That is the explanation for this. And this explains some of these old records of houses suddenly going on fire, although the lava was still coming down the hill. And that is because of these bombs moving ahead, and they are, of course, hot inside. And if they enter an area that can actually go up in flames, that's what's likely going to happen. So, but I want to talk a little more about the lavas here, close to the vents. The lavas came down in these lava rivers, spectacular to watch. And further down in the valleys, the lava was spreading out, as I pointed out before. Here we have a lava river, and here it's spreading out. And this was a densely populated area. And here in this diagram, you can see this. So this is very steep, very low population density. Here we have a lot of people living, and this is where the lava came down in 2021. And the lava reached the sea with only a few within a few days. And here we have a small animation of the lava coming down, going around this older volcanic edifice and reaching the sea within less than 2 weeks. So, and this is this older edifice, Montagna Todoke, and you see Montagna Todoke prior to the eruption with a lush area here, loads of farming, loads of fincas, and this is the area after the eruption. It's effectively entirely wiped out. So this is from October 21. This is looking from Montaña La Laguna, one of the older little volcanoes, up to the vent side. And this is in December 21. Let me just bring that back and forth. So here you go. Within just a few weeks, you see the difference there. Of course, this was devastating for local agriculture, and 370 hectares of cultivated land was destroyed, and together with the pyroclastic deposits, over 1,000 hectares of plantation area were affected. And well, whenever the lava enters the cities, it's also kind of very devastating, and this was my first encounter when you drive down this valley in La Laguna, and you're hitting a wall basically, but this wall is made of lava. So this is cold in this case already, and you really see how this was creeping into the town, and it was the end of the road, if you will. Now a new road has been built and you can drive over this again, but this took several years to come to this stage. So, and when I sent this picture home from my first visit, my wife was asking, oh, the poor tree, did it survive? And I went back a few weeks later, and the sad news is the tree did not survive. It was in lava, obviously, so, and it was too hot for it. So, but here's a bit of lava, and this was one of my first encounters on site. When you walk up to the lava, that's how it looks. And to show you a little bit more about the power of the lava, here you are. So here we have a wall of almost 10 meters of type lava moving forward. And it's like a bulldozer, it dozes over everything. There was attempts to save a little church in the village of Todoke, and the local people thought if they dig a ditch, they could divert the lava flowing along the ditch. Of course, the geologists said this is the wrong type of lava. You can do this with Pahoi lava, but not with lava. And indeed, the lava just rolled over the village and took out the church. And it was, of course, psychologically a big blow for the local population. So the eruption lasted for 85 days. Almost 8,000 people were evacuated. More than 2,800 buildings were destroyed. Over 1,000 hectares of farmland were destroyed or are still covered. 70 kilometers of vital roads were taken out. But the good news is nobody died in the eruption, but the losses are on the order of 1,000 million euro, 1 billion euro. So the costs are enormous at this point. And let me talk a little bit more about lava. And this is one of the lava pictures I must show everybody who is listening to me, and that is we often tell our students that we have two types of lava, lava and Pahoi lava. And if Pahoi lava cools down, it can make lava, but we cannot make it the other way round. And I tell you, it's not entirely true. If we add the right ingredients, you can make Pahoi lava from lava. So here's lava, and here you see Pahoi lava, just in the vicinity of this old car. So if you reheat it, you can actually make Pahoi lava from lava, but you need a heat source. And here is one of those. But of course, what I'm also trying to say is that the lava didn't care about what was in its way. It takes all of these things with it. And while this is psychologically very devastating for the population, it is scientifically exciting because we have this large lava field that was building up there, and we were able to sample the different stages of it. So I'd like to talk a little bit about the geochemistry of the lavas now. Here is the thickness of the lava field. Here near the vents, it's very thick, and then it thins out. In this portion, it's about 70 meters thick, the lava, so it will take many more years for it to cool. And it was erupted at 1150, 1140 degrees, and we have over 70 meters. Maximum velocity measured was over 30 kilometers per hour. So, and here's a few impressions of the lava close up. And when you sample it, you try to isolate a piece, and then you often need to cool it down. Let me give you an impression here as well. So these look kind of normal, but they are, of course, hot, these rocks. And if you touch them, you go to hospital for sure. And this is why you need to be very careful with them. So we have this laser device that measures the temperature. So you don't actually have to touch it. You can work out how hot it is beforehand, and then you can start working with that. So a few geochemical parameters here just for the flavor of it. So this is a paper we published from our successive lava sampling. And here what we see is the magnesium values. They are actually kind of changing. They're rising, and then they're plateauing. So the eruption was going more mafic, if you will. And we see this also with other parameters. Alkalis are going down, and then we are plateauing. Aluminium is going down, then we are plateauing. And we did this also for some isotopes. So here, for example, we have radium osmium isotopes. And the higher these values, the more we likely have some crustal interaction. And here, indeed, early in the eruption, we seem to have had some crustal interaction, while later it was more magma coming from deeper in the system. The crystallinity was also changing. In November, we had larger crystals than, for example, in September. And not only did the crystal size change, also the different proportions. Early in the eruption, we had a little bit of amphibole. This completely disappeared 2 weeks into the eruption, and we had a dominant assemblage of olivine, CPX, and some plagioclase. The intriguing thing is that we have a seismic record that's really very good, and there seems to be two main domains that have affected the eruption. The first one here, and we believe that hosted a tephritic type of magma. And then we had a deeper one hosting a basanitic type of magma. And the eruption started here at this bar. And the first 2 weeks of the eruption, there was only seismicity in this shallower reservoir, but not in the deep one. The deep one only kicks in about 2 weeks into the eruption. And surprise, surprise, that's actually when we see the chemical change, about 2 weeks into the eruption. So we believe that the chemical change we see links to the plumbing system, to the architecture under the volcano. And we published this, that there's a deeper and a shallower magma chamber feeding the eruption. And I think that's now widely accepted. And if that's true, then indeed, this shallower reservoir should have seen some crustal material. And indeed, we had some rhenium osmium isotopes, as I've shown, and they seem to suggest that this early part coming from maybe shallower in the system would have had some crustal influence. This is some unpublished data. This is oxygen isotopes. And because we can measure the entire eruption, we have very good resolution now. And what we see is the first 2 weeks of the eruption, we have a much wider spread of values than later in the eruption. And this goes back to work I did, well, almost a century ago, I was to say, more than 20 years ago. This was on xenolith, and there we established different chemistries of xenolith under the Canary Islands. And the good news is that this can be explained, these low values, by, for example, having ocean-crossed gabbros that we're assimilating, and I think that's the answer for this. So this is the summary here. We have likely a two-chamber plumbing system, And the lower one comes from the mantle. The upper one has been sitting in the crust for some time, likely interacting. The eruption started with material being fed from here, but ultimately the material from the upper mantle was coming in. And if we only look at the upper mantle material, we can actually define the end member composition for the oxygen isotopes in the Western Canaries now, and it happens to be 5.3 if you are interested. It's a little below MORP, so it suggests there's likely a plume component in there, which brings us back to the initial consideration of plume versus other processes, and here we seem to chemically see the plume as well. So just very briefly, what else are we doing? This is ongoing work. Here, one of the realities is, that when we have magma rising from one reservoir to the next and then to the surface, there likely we're expecting some hiccups. We're expecting, like in your garden hose, we're expecting some stop and go. And this may be the reason for these intensity changes that we saw during the eruption. This is the number of seismic events that we have. This is the time of the eruption. And this is the seismic events in the deeper reservoir. And this is the ones in the shallower reservoir. And we think that we can connect certain events, that they translate upwards with a time delay. And that this may be the reason for these intensity changes at the surface. Whenever a new slug or a new pulse comes, we may actually have a new event increase. And we're trying to numerically model this. This, of course, is very frustrating for the authorities, but also for the local population. But if we're dealing with reservoirs of multiple chambers, we might have to accept that these changes are normal rather than the exception. So I'd like to move to Iceland now, and before I do this, I'll take a sip of water. But also in 2021, my life changed because there was 2 active volcanoes suddenly, and it was also COVID. So it was really challenging to not only get permits and go there, but actually to do the work. So Fagradalsfjall, it sits in southeast Iceland, and here we have a spreading ridge that goes through the entire North Atlantic. And it spreads at about 2 centimeters a year. And we're sitting in this part here, in the Reykjanes Peninsula, and the ridge continues submarine. And there, of course, we have a lot of submarine volcanoes as well. Again, we have a plume. The only difference here to the Canaries is that we're interacting with a plate boundary as well. We have a plume that comes up along a plate boundary. So this is the area, this is the ridge. It's not a simple plate boundary, it doesn't just do that. It's actually more like a strike-slip system. And some people call it an oblique opening system or a pull-apart basin. Different terms are out there. But effectively, it moves like this. It opens up space, and that allows magma to come up. These are not super strong and explosive eruptions. They're more eruptions that are oozing out. This is why they are so, well, friendly. At least they were friendly for quite some time. So you may have seen this before, but on the Reykjanes Peninsula, we seem to have these periods of eruption. This one goes to 1,000 years before our time calculation. Then we have another one here, another period here in the Middle Ages, round about the year 1000. And then we have this large gap again that we saw several times before. And now Fagradalsfjall and Svartsengi have started to erupt again. And this led people to speculate, are we dealing with another major eruption interval that could last for decades or potentially even centuries? Well, it's possible, but we have to see. So we certainly know that there has been a lot of eruptions in a very short time, and I will tell you later, we're expecting another one in the next few weeks. So it's certainly true from our current perspective. So what happened in March 21? So this is now a good kind of reminder. It's almost an anniversary. We had a new eruption starting at Geldingadalia, and a 700-meter long fissure opened up, and lava erupted from that fissure until April, and then several new vents opened up. And here is the valley Geldinga. Here's the neighboring valley Meradalia, and we'll come to that. And there we have a row of vents, and this is one of the larger vents. And here's numbers, and this is the age, 1 being the oldest and 6 being the youngest vent here. So this is how it looked early in the eruption, and this is something I share with my students frequently. You know, you may not have the perfect start in life. Look at vent number 5 here. This was early in the eruption, but if you work hard, you might end up like this, because vent number 5 turned out to be the biggest of them all in the end. So he was taking over, and he was forming the largest edifice. So this is the vent system from the 21 eruptions, and this is the vents that sent the lava down. And some of these spectacular lava lake images, they come from vent number 5, and there in summer that year you had rhythmic eruptions. It was pulsing up, it was calming down, pulsing up on a scale of 20 minutes or so. Spectacular footage, and many people flew their drones into the eruption just to get the cool footage. I don't know whether it's worth it, but here we are. This is one of those drone images. This is the lava lake, and the outflow is there. And this is new material just coming up, and here you can see the lava lake in action. So the lava was then continuing to the neighboring valleys, Meradalia and Nathagi, and this is the Nathagi system where the lava was flowing down. And there was big concerns that the lava would actually go, the lava would actually go and cut this road here, because this is one of the main roads along the coast, and this would have been an infrastructure disaster. But the lava decided not to do that, and it stopped a little bit earlier. But let me share this with you. This is a time-lapse footage of Nathagi Valley being filled. So, and here you see the lava inflating, so there's still a lot of gas in there, and it pushes the crust up. There's maybe some flow underneath as well, but this is typical that the lava is actually increasing its volume towards the end during the cooling episode as well. So that was a little kind of time lapse for filling Nathagi Valley, and this was just a few days, and now we don't need to do it again. But after that, the eruption calmed down. In September it stopped. Just a year later, we had another eruption, Meradalia, and this was a lot smaller, but right next to the 21 valley. And again, we started off with a fissure, and I would like you to look at this little cone here, because he's going to become the biggest. So, and there it is. Here you can just see him in the background. This is the fissure as it ran up the hill, and this is where the eruption started. So this is, if you will, the very earliest pulse of the 22 eruption. And here's a little vent. So this is a baby volcano that didn't grow big. And how exciting, if you're a volcanologist. This is a baby volcano that only lasted for about 1 day, and then it stopped because the magma was erupted 100 meters further down the row. So a real coincidence, but this one was preserved and not covered. Nowadays, it's completely yellow because it's covered with sulfur, but I really fell in love with it. So this is the Meradalia volcano once it grew in full, and this is us sampling the lava there, because the process is the same. You have to go and you have to get a sample close by, and sometimes you're lucky. This is the 21 lavas, and you see the on satellite, you see the 22 lavas coming, so you know this lava field will be covered within 2-3 hours. So you go there, you take a last sample of the 21 lavas, you wait, you have a cup of coffee, and then the 22 lavas arrive. Perfect timing, and then you can sample 2 lavas in 1 day. And here it is. So this is the new lava, and this is then us taking some samples there. So this is the 22 lava, as I said, and then just a year later, we had another eruption, Rutter, as it's called, and it happened up here. The vent is up here. The lava was flowing down here, and eventually it was meeting the 21 and the 22 lavas. The style of eruption was almost identical to the previous years. Again, we have these cinder cones with some pyroclastic activity, and again, we have lava flows that come down the valleys and they're flowing towards lower ground, obviously. So I wanted to afford you a look into one of those into one of those lava lakes. And it looks quite benign. And if you're kind of standing in front of it, you kind of have a little bit of a burp every now and then, and you don't get the full impression, because once you have a drone, it looks like this. Oops. So it's really a boiling lava lake inside, and it's, in this case, boiled for several weeks, and then you see a little bit of material being kind of, popped out here, and that's what you see down on the surface as these little spurts coming up, but the real action is actually hidden inside, and this turned out to be the case for virtually all of these vents. So here we have the 23 lava coming down the hills, and it actually sits in this case on the 21 lava here. This is the 23 lava, and there you see the hot new material covering the older, cooler material. Here is the front of 23 lavas traveling on 21 lavas, and here we have the 23 lava traveling on 21 lava just before it meets the 22 lava. So you get a sense of stratigraphy there. It's a mess, to be honest, but in just a few places, you can actually get a complete stratigraphy. So here now, this was just the day before they met. Here's the 23 lava about to meet the 22 lava, both on a substrate of the 21 lava. And this is when they eventually met. This is this point here. And there we have the 21 lava, the 22 lava, and the 23 lava. There's one place with perfect stratigraphy. And look, we're standing there as if we shot a lion, because we're so proud that we have this one place with perfect stratigraphy. But yeah, what it teaches us is that lava fields are much more complicated than we think. When we look at these flood basalts and we see them horizontally layered, we think they're all the same. They're much more complicated. That's what we've learned from there. And that there may actually be time jumps in there as well. So we need to be very careful about this. So sampling was going on for kind of many, many months. And in the last 2 years, the eruptions got more frequent. So it actually got worse with the sampling. But this is what it is. And then we had this experience. It was a bit of a game changer here, because we got a donation from a steel manufacturing company about these tin suits, about these reflective suits. And the sampling is still the same. You still have to go there. But it was really popular on YouTube. Suddenly we had 60 million views on YouTube just because we had the spacesuits. So I recommend them. If you want to get famous, spacesuits are great. The work is the same, I'm afraid. So you can kind of stay there a little longer with them, but at the end of the day, working with lava is always dangerous, so you need to be very mindful about this. So a few geochemical kind of parameters, just because that's what we do. So here again, we have magnesium. Here's the time of the eruption. This is the 21 eruption only. And again, we're going up in magnesium, we're plateauing, and then we're going down a little. And we see this for other parameters as well. Here's niobium-zirconium ratio going up, and then we're staying. This was very unfortunate, this gap there, this sampling gap. And people often ask me, what happened? And I tell you exactly what happened. This was summer vacation in Iceland. So nobody went out to sample. Can you believe it? So, but anyway, here we are. So we have a bit of a gap there, unfortunately. but otherwise we're getting a good sense. And activity was low in that time window anyway. So we can then start to use these trace elements to think about mantle end members. And one of the very early ideas here was that we might be dealing with different mantle end members coming in the same eruption. And this was a very exciting idea early on. So people started to play with this. Could it be that we have different end members here? And this is end members that have been proposed in the literature, and the eruption would span quite a lot of these end members, and they would change within a single eruption. So we got really excited about this, and people published this. But a little later, the first barometry came through, and people wanted this initially to come with different inputs from different systems in the mantle to the eruption. But then the barometry came through, and the barometry, this is CPX barometry. We are not really in the mantle. The deepest we have is these guys here with 15 kilometers. So the deepest we have is here, and then it's higher up. So most of the plumbing system is actually in the lower crust potentially, not in the mantle. So while this idea of mantle storage and different mantle contributions was really attractive for a short while, it seemed to start to fall apart rather swiftly, unfortunately. And it was really put to rest with this paper here, dated 24, that again, like in La Palma, showed that there was an early contamination signal in the very earliest magmas. And again, that would be consistent with magma being stored in the crust and being reactivated by new mantle material coming in. So, and there's this paper here, I recommend it if you're interested, deep crustal assimilation during the 21, and this implies it's not mantle storage exclusively. So, the eruptions continue, and I wanted to say a few words about that as well. The eruptions shifted in late 23, and they shifted here from Fagradalsfjall to Sundnúkar, and this is what's known as the Svartsengi system. And part of the problem there is that while this here was all very nice, nobody was living there, there was only a few sheep, people could go and have a Disneyland volcano. Once activity started over here, things changed dramatically. Overnight, life was different. Not only do we have the fishing town of Grindavik, we also have the Svartsengi power plant, which is the one that delivers the energy for Keflavik International Airport and the hot water. And we have the Blue Lagoon, which is the biggest tourist attraction in all of Iceland. And not surprisingly, the Icelanders started very quickly to take measures, and one of the most successful measures was to build these lava barriers, lava berms. Now, the entire town is surrounded by these lava berms. It's like a fortress now. And also the Svartsengi power plant is surrounded by these lava berms. In some cases, even several rows. It looks like First World War trenches. So the big question is, can the city be saved? And the answer is, I don't know. But it's now gone so expensive that it's maybe not worthwhile saving it anymore, because now we're approaching, like in La Palma, we're approaching 1 billion euros of costs for all of these efforts, and that's starting to get very, very pricey. So this is just a few impressions. This is the lava outside the lava barrier at the Blue Lagoon. This was from 24, and this is now the Sundnúkar lava field. By now it's gone all the way down here. Actually, the map is not fully up to date. And this is Grindavik town. And this is actually a lava barrier. This is why the shape is so weird, because it's flowing around there. So this is the Blue Lagoon, and Grindavik is just down the valley here. This is the Svartsengi power plant. The volcano is out here. The lava comes down here and is surrounding it at this point. And this is the parking site, and this was planned, believe it or not, but this is the barrier, and the parking site was outside the barrier, so they knew if there was an eruption happening, it will eat up the parking site, and so it did. So this was a calculated risk, if you will. It looks dramatic, but it wasn't quite so bad. So this is from April 24, and this is Sundnucker lava. I'll give you a little impression here as well. I think you get the idea. So this lava, when it comes, it's very hard to stop. And it comes relentlessly, although it comes slow. You can walk away from it usually. But if you have objects that cannot be moved, you have a bit of a problem. And this is where these lava barriers have turned out to be so useful. In red here, the lava barriers. Here's a double lava barrier, because the first one was breached actually. And here's the one that goes around the Blue Lagoon and the Svartsengi power plant. And actually, this hot water pipe to the Keflavik airport was cut several times during the eruptions. And also this road here to Grindavik was cut several times during the eruptions. But the Icelanders are very quick to rebuild it. In fact, they even have open roads going through barriers, and they have a fleet of trucks close by. If the eruption starts, they can close that hole within less than 2 hours. So they are really on standby. It's like the volcano fire brigade. They will close these barriers in no time. By the time the lava comes, these things are closed off. And the lava reached Grindavik town at one occasion, and here's a few impressions of this. So here's lava inside the village. All the houses that got destroyed were new houses. Nobody lived in them yet. They were in the outskirts. And here's a few impressions of some of the earthquake damage. This is what I call the bendy house, because you can see how it's bending down. There's open cracks in the surrounding, of course. No, we don't need to do that. And, well, many of the infrastructure needs to be redone. I'm going to take you now on a very short drive on what I experienced as quite an intense situation. I'm going to take you on a drive on the lava road in Iceland. So whenever the eruption happened, the Icelanders go there very quickly, and they put gravel on top of it. So this lava is only a few days old, and as you can tell, it's still hot. And now it just rains, so much of it is just steam, it's just water vapor, but you get a sense of the situation. And you must not stop on this bit. You can stop like this guy afterwards and take a photo or so, but you're not allowed to stop on the road while you're on the lava, for obvious reasons. So, this is the eruption sequence now. It started off with this one event, Geldingadalur 21, then we had Meradalia, then Little Rutur, then we had a major earthquake here, and then the Sundnucker event started, and they're coming in quick succession, bang, bang, bang. And they are a lot more destructive because they're a lot closer to a lot of the infrastructure. And people often ask me then, so how do you know when these eruptions happen? And one of the best indicators is actually the inflation. So here is the year 2024. This is Sundnucker 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And in each of these cases, we have an uplift of the ground. The ground is pushing up because magma is accumulating. And at a certain threshold, we get to an eruption. And I went through the trouble of looking how it is right now, and that's how it looks right now. So this is January 26th, so now we're February 26th, we're here. The magma chamber under the Reykjans is fuller than it ever has been right now. Why it hasn't erupted in the last few weeks already, we don't know. Maybe the ground is very fractured and it accommodates the magma differently. Maybe it's not as gas rich and it doesn't push up, but the reality is that looking at this, we're expecting another eruption anytime now. So it might happen in the next few days. It's a volcano. It might not happen for a few weeks, but looking at the accumulation, it's been slowing down, but it's still going. So if it continues going, an eruption is the most likely interpretation here. So, a few final words, and this is really to assess how big this whole problem is. We've seen now Grindavik town is at risk. We've seen the Svartsengi power plant is at risk, but how big is that problem? And there are several of these older systems here. So are they all active? Can they all be active? Is there magma feeding all of them in the future? Well, in order to ask these questions, we came up with these three hypotheses. And here's the one that I showed earlier, the mantle feeding system. And then there's older work going back to some previous eruption episodes, and they suggested there was potentially a magma chamber under the entire peninsula. And that would imply there would also be magma under the capital of Reykjavik. That's a bit of a disconcerting thought, isn't it? Having magma under the capital of Reykjavik. But there's also this third hypothesis, and that is maybe these are just small pockets that feed isolated systems. So how do you kind of sort this out? Well, the first thing was you look at whether the lavas are continuous. And Geldingadali in yellow and Sundnukar, the first lavas, in red here, and there seems to be a continuation from magnesium, chromium, potassium, titanium, etc. So we also looked at trace elements in olivine, and they also seem to continue. So the good news was it's not a new lava altogether or a new magma. It seems to be the same volcano. So that was good news to start with. We're dealing with one main volcano. The other thing we then did is, well, if we have problems, if you are going to the doctors, they may send you for a CT scan. And of course, we can do that with the Earth. We can do a computer tomography. And this is what we did. Seismic tomography, and this goes down. We lose resolution here in the lower crust, but we're finding this anomaly here at about 9 kilometers depth, and it seems to continue to at least 12 kilometers depth. There seems to be also earthquake swarms here and here. There's one right under Sundnukar, and there seems to be also an older swarm that went right up there to the eruption site at Fagradalsfjall. So the good news is that it seems that there's one larger system that feeds these different volcanoes at the surface, which is consistent with the one magma type hypothesis at least. So how big is that system? Well, it's very hard to tell, but if you take some assumptions based on the seismic data, you can calculate a fluid percentage, and you can then make an estimate for the crystallinity versus the fluid. And in this case, we calculate 50 cubic kilometers of magma in that reservoir. To give you a flavor, the Mount St. Helens eruption 1980 in the US was 0.9 cubic kilometers. So this would look like an awful lot, but I assure you, most magma will never erupt. It will stay down there. And this is consistent with the very small eruptions we had over the last few years. The other good news is that looking at the dimensions of this, here you have the kilometers, looking at the dimensions of this, it actually is only something like 10 kilometers in length and only about 5 kilometers in width. There is, and that's the good news, there's no magma under Reykjavik. So it's only very local under these volcanoes. And that's the real takeaway thing. If you are concerned about the entire peninsula waking up, it's not going to happen in the near future. A lot more magma would be needed for that. That's not to say it can't happen. In the decades to come, if new magma arrives, everything is possible. But right now, with the current magma supply rate, we're not looking at a volcanic episode over the entire peninsula lasting for hundreds of years. It looks a lot smaller than that. So this is also consistent with some of the new chemistry we have. And I don't want to go into the details, but now we're actually seeing this initial plateauing. It's changing a little bit, and we are now fractionating a little more. And here's some oxygen isotopes. And for those of you familiar with oxygen, the upper crust in Iceland has very low oxygen values. The mantle has values in that gray area. And now we're moving towards somewhat lower values, which is consistent with the idea of magma being stored high up in the crust as well, directly under the volcano, and not new magma coming in all the time from depth. So the system seems to, despite the fact that we are expecting an eruption, the system seems to calm down a little. But of course, there can be changes, there can be more tectonic events, there can be more magma coming up as a consequence, things can change. But if it stays like this, then that would be my personal prediction. So what have we learned? Multi-reservoir magma supply systems are messy. They're not simple. They are actually very complicated. And so far we thought of basaltic eruptions as simple, but they're not. They're actually very complicated. At present, it seems that the volcano plumbing system under the Reykjans is a single one, but it's branching. And that causes us some of the headaches that we are having. It shifts the magma eruptions from one place to another, not always to our convenience. But the eruption frequency is also very high, so we're expecting more events there. But how this will unfold with the infrastructure, we will have to see. The eruption frequency in the Canaries is a lot lower. And if you do the calculations, there is a 50% possibility of another eruption on the Cumbre Vieja in the next 50 years. So it's bad enough if you want to buy a house there, but it's not as bad as if you live in Trinidad. So you need to think about this if you're interested in this kind of things. And Spain as a country needs to think about this because we will have more eruptions and there will be more people affected. It's predictable. So Iceland has very low population density. That's a saving grace, if you will. But the infrastructure on the Reykjans is extremely vulnerable. And the bitter lesson here is that rifts, whether they are volcanic rifts like on La Palma or tectonic rifts like on Iceland, rifts don't care about what we do at the surface. They will do what they want to do. Rather, and this is where I'm, trying to make a point to all of us, it's rather us who need to learn about rifts and volcanoes in rifts and trying to take the good things away and avoid the bad things, rather than blaming the volcanoes for being bad without having done the homework of trying to understand them. So I say thank you very much, and I hope you found this a little bit of interest.
Thank you for your excellent presentation.
My pleasure.
Beautiful. Thank you.